I was 58 years old when my own son looked me in the eyes and said, "You are no longer family. You can leave with whatever fits inside one suitcase." Everyone at the dinner table became silent. My daughter lowered her head. My wife never said a single word. I stood there waiting for someone to tell him this was only a cruel joke. Nobody spoke. My son walked to the front door and held it open as if he could not wait for me to disappear. I looked around the house I had built with my own hands. Every wall carried memories. Every room held years of sacrifice. Yet in that moment, I realized memories mean nothing when people stop respecting the person who created them. I quietly packed one old suitcase, picked up my late father's wristwatch, took a faded family photograph and walked out into the cold night. I never imagined that 10 years later the same people would stand outside my gate begging for another chance. 10 years earlier, my life had looked very different. I worked as a carpenter. I was never rich, but I never let my family go hungry. Every dollar I earned went toward their future. I skipped vacations so my children could attend better schools. I repaired my own boots instead of buying new ones because tuition always came first. Every Christmas, I bought gifts for everyone except myself, because watching my children smile felt like the greatest reward in the world. When my son Daniel wanted to study business, I sold the small piece of farmland my father had left me. Everyone told me not to do it because land always increases in value. I ignored them because I believed investing in my son's future was worth more than any property. Daniel hugged me that day and promised he would never forget what I had done for him. I believed every word when my son Daniel wanted to study business. I sold the small piece of farmland my father had left me. Everyone told me not to do it because land always increases in value. I ignored them because I believed investing in my son's future was worth more than any property. Daniel hugged me that day and promised he would never forget what I had done for him. I believed every word. Years passed and Daniel became successful. He started wearing expensive suits, driving luxury cars and talking about investments that sounded too complicated for me to understand. I felt proud every time someone praised him because I remembered the shy boy who once carried my toolbox after school. I never imagined success would slowly change the way he looked at me. Everything became worse after he married Emily. From the first day she entered our family, she treated me like an unwanted guest. She smiled politely when other people were watching, but the moment we were alone, her expression changed completely. She often complained that I spoke too loudly, dressed too simply, and embarrassed them in front of wealthy friends. I pretended not to notice because I wanted peace inside the family. One evening, I accidentally overheard Emily speaking to Daniel in the kitchen. She said, "Your father makes this house look poor. Successful people should not live with someone who smells like sawdust." Daniel did not defend me. He simply replied, "Give me some time and I will handle it." Those words stayed with me for weeks, even though I tried convincing myself I had misunderstood. From that day, everything changed. They stopped inviting me to family dinners. They made decisions without asking my opinion and slowly treated me like a stranger, living inside my own home. My wife avoided eye contact every time I tried to discuss it. I could see fear in her face, but I still believed our family would heal with time. Then one Sunday, Daniel announced he had purchased a beautiful new house in an expensive neighborhood. Everyone celebrated. He proudly explained that the old family home would be sold because it no longer matched their lifestyle. I smiled and congratulated him even though my heart felt strangely heavy. I had built that house board by board with my own hands. Every nail carried a piece of my life. A few weeks later, Daniel asked me to sign several documents. He said they were only paperwork related to the property sale and taxes. I trusted my son without reading every page carefully because I never imagined he would use my trust against me. 3 months later, the moving trucks arrived. I believed we were all moving together into the new house. Instead, Daniel carried one old suitcase into the living room, looked directly at me, and calmly said, "This is yours. "You are not coming with us anymore." My entire world collapsed in a single sentence. I asked quietly, "Where should I go?" Daniel shrugged his shoulders and answered, "You are an adult. You will figure something out." Emily smiled without saying a single word, and that silent smile hurt more than any insult I had ever heard. I picked up my suitcase, looked one last time at the family photograph hanging on the wall, and walked toward the front door. Just before leaving, I turned around and said one sentence they would never forget. "One day, the truth always comes home before the people who try to hide it." None of them understood what I meant. Neither did I know that less than 24 hours later, a black luxury car would stop beside me and a lawyer would step out holding an envelope that would change every single life connected to my family. The lawyer introduced himself as Michael Harrison and asked if I was Thomas Walker. I nodded without understanding why someone wearing an expensive suit was looking for a man carrying one old suitcase. He handed me a sealed envelope and said, "Your father instructed me to give this to you only after you left your family home." My hands began shaking because my father had passed away almost 15 years earlier. I slowly opened the envelope and found a handwritten letter. "My dear son, if you are reading this, it means the people you loved have finally shown you who they truly are. I prayed this day would never come, but I have watched enough of life to know that money changes hearts faster than time ever can. Remember what I told you when you were young. Never measure your worth by the way people treat you during your weakest moment, because the truth always arrives when they believe they have already won." Tears filled my eyes as I continued reading. "Your grandfather built more than a small farm. He built a business that nobody outside our family ever knew about. I kept it hidden because I wanted the next owner to be someone with honesty instead of greed. If your family remained loyal, you would never need this letter. But if they abandoned you, then everything now belongs to you." I looked at the lawyer with confusion and asked what business. He smiled gently and removed another folder from his briefcase. Inside were property deeds, company shares, and bank documents worth more money than I had ever imagined. I thought there had to be some mistake because my father had always lived a simple life. He drove an old truck, wore the same boots for years, and never spoke about wealth. The lawyer explained that my grandfather had secretly invested in warehouses, farmland, and manufacturing companies many decades earlier. Those investments had quietly grown into a business empire. My father continued managing everything in complete silence because he wanted to protect the family from greed. According to his will, I was now the only legal owner because I had spent my entire life proving I valued people more than money. I stood speechless while the lawyer continued, explaining that the total value of the estate had recently been estimated at more than $200 million. I laughed because it sounded impossible. Then I looked at every official document one more time and realized none of it was a dream. The lawyer handed me one final envelope and quietly said, "There is one more instruction from your father." I opened it and read his final message. "Never use this money for revenge. Use it to discover who truly deserves to stand beside you." Those words stayed inside my heart forever. The lawyer drove me to a private estate outside the city. Large iron gates slowly opened and revealed a beautiful property surrounded by ancient oak trees. There was a peaceful lake behind the main house and a workshop larger than any building I had ever worked inside. The caretaker greeted me with a smile and simply said, "Welcome home, Mr. Walker." That night, I sat alone on the wooden porch thinking about everything that had happened. During the previous 24 hours, I had lost my family but discovered a truth that would change my future forever. I made myself one promise: nobody would know who I had become until I learned who truly loved me without knowing my wealth. Meanwhile, across the city, Daniel and Emily celebrated the sale of the old family house. They believed they had finally removed the last obstacle standing between them and the wealthy lifestyle they wanted. They had no idea that the man they had thrown away now owned companies that were larger than everything they dreamed of buying. 3 weeks later, Daniel received an unexpected invitation to attend an international business conference where the largest investors in the country would announce a partnership worth hundreds of millions of dollars. He proudly accepted without realizing that the mysterious chairman hosting the event was someone he had already betrayed. When Daniel entered the grand ballroom and looked toward the stage, his confident smile disappeared because the man standing behind the microphone was someone he never expected to see again. It was me wearing a tailored suit while hundreds of the most powerful business leaders in the country stood and applauded my arrival. When the applause finally ended, I looked across the ballroom and our eyes met for the first time in 3 weeks. Daniel froze where he was standing. Emily grabbed his arm and whispered something into his ear, but neither of them moved. Every executive in the room believed they were looking at an ordinary business meeting, while only 3 people understood how impossible this moment truly was. I welcomed everyone to the conference and thanked them for traveling from across the country. Then I introduced myself as the new chairman of Walker Global Holdings. Several cameras focused on the stage, while reporters prepared to cover the announcement of our newest investment project worth more than $1 billion. Daniel slowly sat down without taking his eyes off me. The same man he had forced out of his house with one suitcase was now opening the largest business conference of the year. After my presentation, investors lined up to shake my hand. CEOs thanked me for previous partnerships, and financial journalists asked questions about future expansion. I answered calmly while pretending not to notice Daniel waiting near the back of the room. Eventually, everyone moved toward lunch and he finally walked over with Emily beside him. For a few seconds, nobody spoke. Daniel forced a nervous smile and quietly said, "Dad, I think we need to talk." I looked at him with the same calm expression he had shown me when he told me to leave his house. I replied, "This is a business conference and I have a very busy schedule. If you have a business proposal, my assistant can arrange a meeting in the future." Emily immediately interrupted and said there must be some misunderstanding because we had no idea you were involved with this company. I looked directly at her and answered, "There was no misunderstanding. When you watched me leave with one suitcase, there was no misunderstanding. When you smiled while my own son closed the front door behind me, today there is still no misunderstanding." Neither of them could respond. Just then, several international investors approached us and congratulated me on acquiring another manufacturing group. One elderly billionaire smiled and said, "Thomas, your reputation for honesty is the reason we invested with you instead of anyone else." After they walked away, Daniel looked completely stunned because he realized this success had not appeared overnight. It had been built on values he had thrown away. Later that afternoon, one of Daniel's business partners introduced himself to me, hoping to discuss future cooperation. After a short conversation, I asked a simple question: "Who currently owns 40% of your company?" He proudly answered, "Daniel Walker does." I smiled politely and asked my legal team to bring me one specific folder. Inside that folder was documentation proving Walker Global Holdings had quietly purchased the bank that financed Daniel's company several months earlier. According to the contracts, every outstanding loan would soon require renewal under our approval. Daniel suddenly understood that the future of his business now depended on the father he had abandoned. He immediately apologized and said he had made terrible mistakes. He admitted that Emily had constantly pressured him to remove me from their lives because she believed I would damage their social image. He claimed he had never stopped loving me but allowed pride and ambition to control his decisions. I listened without interrupting because excuses always sound convincing after consequences arrive. I told him something my father once told me: Character is revealed by the choices people make when they believe nobody can stop them. You believed I was powerless, and your decision reflected exactly who you were. Money did not change this situation, it only revealed it. Daniel lowered his head and quietly asked if there was any way to repair the relationship. Before I could answer, my assistant hurried toward us carrying another confidential file. She whispered that our investigators had discovered something important involving Daniel's company and requested an immediate private meeting. I opened the report and my expression changed instantly because the documents showed someone inside Daniel's own executive team had been secretly stealing millions of dollars for years. The fraud was so large that if it became public, his entire company could collapse within days, and the person responsible was someone he trusted, even more than he had once trusted his own father. The emergency meeting began. Only a few minutes later, my legal team, forensic accountants, and senior executives gathered around the conference table while Daniel sat quietly across from me. The report contained thousands of financial transactions that had been hidden inside fake supplier contracts. Millions of dollars had disappeared over the previous 4 years without anyone noticing because the payments had been divided into hundreds of smaller transfers. Every document pointed toward one executive who had earned Daniel's complete trust. His name was Victor Reynolds. He had been Daniel's closest advisor since the company was founded. He attended family dinners, celebrated birthdays, and often called Daniel his younger brother. Daniel stared at the evidence in complete disbelief because he had defended Victor every time someone questioned his decisions. Now the truth was sitting in front of him in black and white. One accountant projected the records onto a large screen and explained how Victor created shell companies, submitted fake invoices, and quietly redirected company money into offshore accounts. The total amount exceeded $80 million. Daniel covered his face with both hands because he realized his business was only days away from bankruptcy. If the fraud became public, he looked at me and quietly said, "I do not deserve your help after everything I did to you, but I am asking anyway because hundreds of innocent employees will lose their jobs if this company collapses." I remained silent for several seconds before answering. "I am not helping because you are my son. I am helping because honest workers should never suffer for the greed of dishonest people." Within hours, my legal department contacted federal investigators, banking regulators, and financial crime specialists. Every account connected to Victor Reynolds was frozen before he even realized the investigation had begun. Security cameras captured him attempting to leave the headquarters, carrying several confidential files. Federal agents stopped him in the parking garage and recovered enough evidence to expose the entire operation. News of the arrest spread across every major business network before sunset. Reporters described it as one of the largest corporate fraud investigations in recent years. Investors expected Daniel's company to collapse the following morning. Instead, Walker Global Holdings announced an emergency financial partnership that guaranteed every employee would keep their job, suppliers would be paid on time, and customer contracts would continue without interruption. The announcement shocked the business world. Journalists asked why I had rescued a company owned by the son who had publicly humiliated me only weeks earlier. I answered with one simple sentence: leadership is measured by the lives you protect, not by the people you punish. That interview was watched by millions of people across the country. Strangers praised the decision while Daniel sat alone watching the broadcast with tears in his eyes because he finally understood the difference between power and character. Several days later, he came to my office without cameras, without expensive clothes, and without excuses. He carried the same old family photograph that had once hung inside our home. He placed it on my desk and quietly said, "I spent years trying to become successful, but I forgot the man who taught me what success actually meant. I cannot change what I did, but I will spend the rest of my life trying to become someone worthy of being called your son. Before I could answer, another visitor arrived unexpectedly. My assistant informed me that Emily was waiting outside and insisted on speaking with both of us. When she entered the room, she no longer looked confident. Her voice shook as she admitted she had hidden something from Daniel for years. She removed a folder from her handbag and placed it on the table. Inside were legal documents, bank statements, and a signed agreement proving that she had secretly planned to divorce Daniel after selling his remaining shares because she believed she could take half of everything he owned and leave the country with another man. Daniel slowly opened the final page and his face turned completely pale because the agreement had already been signed by Emily's attorney and the departure date was only 3 weeks away. The betrayal that destroyed our family had never truly been about me. It had always been part of a much larger plan that was only now beginning to reveal itself. Daniel could not speak for several minutes. He looked at every page inside the folder hoping to find some mistake, but every document carried official signatures, hotel reservations, airline tickets, and financial transfer records. Emily quietly admitted that she had already opened secret accounts overseas and planned to disappear the moment the divorce settlement was complete. She believed Daniel would never discover the truth because she expected him to lose everything after the fraud investigation destroyed his company. She never imagined Walker Global Holdings would step in and save it. Daniel slowly looked at me with tears in his eyes and whispered, "Now I finally understand how you felt when the people you trusted betrayed you." I nodded without anger because life had already taught him the lesson. I never could. Real pain always arrives through the people we choose to trust the most. Emily apologized repeatedly, but neither of us answered. She realized there was nothing left to defend. She quietly collected her handbag, signed the remaining legal papers, and walked out of the office without looking back. That was the last time either of us ever saw her. The following months became a turning point for our family. Daniel worked harder than he ever had before. He personally visited every employee affected by the fraud, apologized for the mistakes made under his leadership, and rebuilt the company with honesty instead of pride. People slowly began trusting him again because they saw genuine change instead of empty promises. One afternoon, Daniel arrived at my house carrying the same old suitcase I had left with on the night he forced me out. He placed it gently on my front porch and said, "I kept this because every time I looked at it, I remembered the worst decision of my life. Today, I want to return it to its rightful owner." I smiled and answered, "I do not need the suitcase anymore because I left my pain inside it many years ago." Several weeks later, we visited the old family property that had once been sold. Walker Global Holdings quietly purchased the land and restored the original house exactly as it had looked when I built it with my own hands. Every room was rebuilt, every wooden beam was repaired, and my late wife's garden bloomed once again. Daniel stood beside me and quietly said, "This house belongs to you because it was always your home long before it became mine." I thanked him but made a different decision. Instead of keeping the property for myself, I transformed it into a free vocational training center where young people could learn carpentry, electrical work, plumbing, and construction without paying tuition. I wanted others to receive opportunities that did not depend on wealth or family connections. Within 3 years, thousands of students graduated from the program. Many started successful businesses of their own and returned later to mentor new students. Watching those young people succeed brought me more happiness than any luxury house or expensive car ever could. One autumn evening, I was invited to receive a national award for leadership and community service. The auditorium was filled with business leaders, government officials, and journalists. When my name was announced, Daniel stood in the front row applauding with tears in his eyes. After accepting the award, the host asked one final question. If you could give the world only one piece of advice, what would it be? I smiled and answered, never throw away the people who stood beside you before success arrived, because money can build a bigger house, but it can never build a better family. Respect earned through kindness lasts longer than wealth earned through greed, and the greatest investment you will ever make is the way you treat the people who love you when you have nothing. The audience stood and applauded for several minutes. As I walked off the stage, I looked toward Daniel and he quietly mouthed the simple words, "Thank you." I smiled because I finally understood something my father had tried to teach me many years earlier. Forgiveness does not erase the past, it frees the future. That night, we drove home together as father and son, not because time had erased our mistakes, but because truth, humility, and forgiveness had finally rebuilt what pride had destroyed. That was the day our family truly found its way home.